Hello. Looking here at the soundtrack from the movie Magnolia. Magnolia was a movie released in 1999. Um, and the bulk of the soundtrack is songs by Aimee Mann. Not all of them, but most of them. Um, so yeah, like I said, the movie came out in 1999, Magnolia. It's by Paul Thomas Anderson, the same guy who did, what else did he do? Boogie Nights. And most recently he did Licorice Pizza, which I haven't seen. What's the other one he did before this one? There was another one in the late 90s he did. Can't think. He did The Master as well. This was about 2008, 2010. Um, and I've seen this movie. I saw it once years and years ago, probably about 20 years ago. I saw it on DVD. It would have been, yeah, probably about 2003 or 4. And I think I was a little bit young for it at that time. You know, actually, I'll talk about that in a minute. First of all, I'll talk about the CD itself. So it's secondhand. It says sale price. I think that would mean I got it on sale for $2. But it's in pretty good condition. It's almost new. Just looking at the booklet. There's Aimee Mann and Paul, PT. PTA, as I've seen sometimes represented, Paul Thomas Anderson. Now apparently, this is something I didn't know, I only found this out relatively recently. He wrote the script of this based on the music of Aimee Mann. So the music inspired him so much that he wrote a whole movie around the music. I assume the music that is featured on the soundtrack, or because Aimee Mann's been a artist for since the early 80s. She was actually in ministry. If you know Aimee Mann's music, and I said she was in ministry, you would probably be as surprised as I am. And she was in a relationship with Al Jorgensen from Ministry. This was very early 80s. So if you've heard early Ministry, it's actually quite different than what later Psalm 69 era Ministry came to sound like. But yeah, so it's a kind of a funny side note. Aimee Mann was in Ministry. Aimee Mann's music is, I saw it on the genre list, and it listed as alternative rock. And I haven't heard her whole discography, but I'd say based on the music on this soundtrack, I wouldn't call her alternative rock. I don't know what I'd call her. There's rock, pop, indie, folk influences altogether. It's hard to put one genre onto it. I suppose there's a little bit of alternative rock influence, but yeah, I'm not sure how I'd really categorize, but I put her voice has always reminded me a little bit of Sheryl Crow's voice, but Aimee Mann's got a little bit more body to her voice, a bit more, I don't know, a bit more mid-range intensity, where Sheryl Crow's more up in the high register more often. And I like Sheryl Crow, but I wouldn't say their music is similar, really, but just their voices have always kind of reminded me of each other a little bit. The movie itself was an ensemble cast. It had Tom Cruise. I guess Tom Cruise was the most famous actor. He was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Oscar for this, and I think he won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor. Philip Seymour Hoffman is in it. John C. Reilly. I can't think who else. Who's that? I recognize her face. But there's quite a few actors in it. I think William H. Macy, is that his name? William H. Macy, the guy from Fargo. And it's hard to describe the movie because there are kind of multiple strands to the story going on simultaneously, as often happens with ensemble casts. But it ends up with frogs raining from the sky. I remember that. Oh, it is William H. Macy. I was right. I'm trying to see if it's using any of the other actors. No, it doesn't. There was a period, and I'd say this is probably true for a lot of people. When I went to university, I started university a little bit later than my peers. I didn't go straight out of high school. I went when I was about 20, 21. And there was a period there around from about 20 through to 24 where I was so intent on consuming stuff, media and art, and just wanting to know about everything that I watched. Actually, it was later than 24, probably went on until I was about 26, 27. I'd watch 10 or 20 movies a week and read books, or multiple books per week, and every film festival that came through, or art, traveling art show that came through, I'd try and go. And I look back now, I'm like because I actually find it quite difficult nowadays to read whole books. My attention span as I got older is kind of diminished, and not even just that, it's just you're busy. But particularly with movies, there was this thing at this video DVD rental shop, had a really good selection of kind of world cinema, and so you could kind of get some quite out there things that you wouldn't typically find in most places. And they had Dollar Tuesday special, so you could go and get, I think, a maximum of 15 movies for $1 each, and keep them out and hold them for a week. And so I'd do that every Tuesday. So I'd be watching a minimum of 15 movies per week. Watch a lot of shit as well with that, because of course you're not all going to be winners. But one of the movies that I watched at some stage was Magnolia. And I remember the music. John Byron does the score. John Byron also did the score for Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Got quite a recognizable style and use of certain kind of instrumentation that as soon as you hear it, you recognize it. I watched this movie and I enjoyed it, but also I definitely feel like I didn't fully get it and understand it. And like I said, I was a bit too young. And there's things now that I know if I went back and watched now, I would much more appreciate them. Because as you're older, just like there are certain things that only work when you're young, and if you watch them when you're older, you wouldn't enjoy them as much. It's certainly the same way, the other way as well. And so reading a bit about the movie, and kind of reminding myself about it, it made me really want to go back and watch it again, because it sounds like it's got a lot of themes that would appeal to me with, the subsequent life experience I've had since I've watched the movie. It says there's themes of like regret and loneliness, and the effect of parents on children and how that affects them growing up, especially fathers and stuff like that. And yeah, so I'm actually going to make an effort over the next week to rewatch this movie. Might have to download it illegally, if I'm being honest, because I don't have Netflix anymore. Even if I did, I actually think it's on Netflix. But I'll check. Maybe if it is, maybe I'll renew my subscription just temporarily to watch this movie. And then, anyway, the soundtrack. So if we look here, we've got One, Momentum, Build That Wall, Deathly, Driving Sideways, You Do, Nothing Is Good Enough. And it says instrumental. That's not an instrumental song though. That's always puzzled me. Wise Up. Okay, so the first 9 songs are all Aimee Mann songs. The songs I particularly like are Deathly, Wise Up. Wise Up is probably my favorite song of hers. Driving Sideways, and Save Me. Save Me is probably the most famous song on this, that of hers, because I've heard that around in other places. I might have actually heard it in another movie. You heard it used as background music for different videos and things. It's quite an emotional song, And, you know, she's basically saying to whoever she's singing to, save me, I need someone to save me. But yeah, that song Wise Up, they use that in the movie, I remember. From my memory, I might be wrong, but from my memory, they're using it as kind of like this musical interlude where they're going through different members of the different characters and looking at them, and this kind of like calling in on them as this emotional music is playing and kind of seeing where they're at, which is a device that's often used in cinema. Another movie that I think they do that with is Donnie Darko, where they have that song. What's the Gary? What's his name? The Tears for Fears cover, Mad World. Isn't there a scene in that where they're kind of going through the same thing, where they're playing that music, and it's kind of like a montage going through the different characters and kind of just calling in on them and seeing them almost like where they're not when in a movie scene where there's dialogue and the characters are talking, it's like they're being watched. Do you know what I mean? We're watching them. But sometimes where they use in certain montages, it's like we're almost looking at them and they don't know we're looking at them. Do you know what I mean? I know Patrick Swayze's character, that a motivational speaker, is crying, kind of like having a breakdown during the montage, and it's kind of like you're seeing him at his lowest point. Well, they did. I'm pretty sure they do the same thing with "Wise Up" in Magnolia, and it's a beautiful song. If I were to recommend two songs, "Wise Up" and "Driving Sideways" are my two favorites on this album. Then they have two Supertramp songs, actually two quite famous Supertramp songs, "Goodbye Stranger" and "Logical Song." Supertramp, I like Supertramp. I actually went through a bit of a Supertramp period a couple of years ago, where the other songs that I'd heard growing up, they were featured on classic rock radio, or not even classic rock, just kind of music from the 70s, 80s. You'd often hear it. And then I kind of re-listened to some of the stuff, and I thought, I actually quite like this. I like the guy's voice. There's two vocalists. There's a guy who does "Goodbye Stranger." I think he's American. And then there's a guy who does the Logical Song, also does "A Long Way Home." That guy, I think his name's Roger something. He's British. And I quite like his voice. And then the last one is a instrumental part from the movie, a John Byron piece called "Magnolia." So it's a pretty strong soundtrack, I think. And just for the fact, like I said, that apparently the movie was written based around the songs. The songs came before the movie. Paul Thomas Anderson heard the music and was so inspired or affected by Aimee Mann's music that he wrote a story, a whole movie script around them. Now again, I'm not sure if it's these songs, but it was some Aimee Mann songs. Aimee Mann has a obviously discography before and after this soundtrack. I haven't listened to it widely. She's still touring. She's in her early 60s now, but she's still working. She's still a working musician. Apparently, she had some health problems around COVID. I remember reading an article about that, but yeah, it's a good soundtrack from what I remember, a pretty good movie, but a movie that I would certainly like to re-watch, and hopefully I will soon. So yeah, Magnolia. Look at that. The sun is coming in, but it's only on this particular patch of the seat. Hang on, I'm going to try and sometimes I need two hands to do it. See, it's around the CD is black, but then because there's quite a, the cover is a magnolia, kind of gold yellow colored magnolia, and it's like almost like it's coming down onto that. Today's Good Friday here of the Easter holiday weekend. Unfortunately, I have to work, but that's okay. Anyway, I hope you, if you have a holiday over Easter, or you celebrate it in any kind of way, then I hope you have a good Easter holiday, or just Easter in general. Thanks for watching.